Okay, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Heritage Trail Citizens Advisory Committee. And we'll start with a roll call. Dana?
Dana Kemp.
Dennis Wiley.
John Reuter.
Lauren Pfeiffer.
Bob Freshman.
Anna Denese.
Brandon Slater. I'm on the screen.
And I'm Clay Downey, and I'm here on behalf of staff.
Great. And then I'd like to ask if anyone has any comments or questions on the minutes. Our last meeting, I believe, was in November. Any comments or questions or updates on the minutes? Can I have somebody move to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. And then I think we have a request for public comment here, so I think now may be a good time to put that in. Brian? I think that you might have to power on, but.
That's probably connected.
You got it.
Does it look connected? Yeah, it looks connected. It's got wide. There you go. That's a good sign.
All right, thanks for the time. It's on the agenda, the discussion of recommendations for the board on assuming the Riley, or the cyclists. Recommendation or request for access back to Riley, and just wanted to kind of hit on a few, provide some context, I guess, and then be available to answer questions if anyone has them. Thought it'd be good to kind of hinge this off CPRD's mission, right? And kind of from the connecting and enriching our community perspective, which is in the CPRD mission. As trail users, right, the cycling community believes that shared access to public parks is a super effective way to connect and enrich the community. I've had, met a ton of people of all sorts through various trail interactions and become more involved in the community through them. I think generally the more users, more community on the trails. Parks, recreation, and open space is in the mission. To be able, like, again, as a trail user, the many native surfaces, the quiet experience, the connection with nature. Riley's pretty unique in that it's relatively undeveloped, aligns with CPRD's focus for parks, recreation, and open space. I think that's a shared desire of many, many trail users, right? The majority of people that are up there, I think, are there because of that uniqueness. Natural resources and agricultural history are key at Riley, where, I think also from my understanding, right, I've kind of been in your guys' shoes many years back now, but some of the original wishes from Crystal, right, is to preserve the property from development and preserve the historical agricultural heritage of the park, and getting users up there is a great way to share that. And to get users there, people need access to the park. By allowing more users up there too, we have more opportunities for education, right? Again, another key in the CPRD mission, but visitation sets the stage for being able to expose people to that agricultural heritage, the natural history. The cycling community has a kind of a close tie with trail stewardship, and I know, certainly myself and many others in the community would be excited to be able to get back up there and do some stewardship work. And again, that's also, a good educational tie there, being able to educate folks, especially younger folks, on that, stewardship, working with trails, and getting them up there to understand the history of the property. So I think, the ask to go back to, bikes on Riley East and horses on Riley West is like very responsible, something that's very manageable, and there's a lot of tools in the management toolbox to help try to make that successful. So, in that spirit, that's all I have to say. And like I said, I want to open myself up to any questions if you guys have them. If not,
I have a question, Brian. You talk about access and people not having access, but everybody has access, right? Everybody has access on their own 2 feet right now, right? Everybody has access to the park. I want to ask if you agree with that statement, that everybody has access to the park right now.
not all modalities, but yeah, I can get up there on the park
Yeah,
today.
so I think everybody has access, just like this, there's certain parks where certain activities don't make sense or aren't permitted, like on the golf course or at the pool, but everybody does have access. I think that's something that I've heard a lot, and I don't understand that statement because everybody does have access. And I agree with a lot of the statements that you had about giving people access and community building and honoring the agricultural heritage and the intent of Crystal's wishes. But everybody, in my opinion, does have access. It's just right now without bikes, but anybody can go up and hike, walk around. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if you agree with that, or if you could clarify that.
Yeah, I think as a cyclist, I don't have access up there, right? It's a huge
On your bike,
percentage of
yeah, but you have access to hike.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that's missing the point that we're trying to make.
Okay, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, we don't have any opportunities for, especially the youth, to get out and do something human-powered, right, that's gonna have a little bit more draw than
Okay.
a regular hike or,
And yeah, and I think that we all know that this issue there's a lot of passion on all sides of this issue, and I don't think this committee obviously it's not the appropriate place to debate it. That's the board decision. Yeah, anybody else have any questions as far
I
as
do
what
have a
Brian
question.
has? Yeah. Oh,
Hi, Brian, thank you for coming here and, I'm very speak directly, so you asking for possibility as a cyclist, to have an access to the open Crystal Riley Park, is that correct?
right, when the access to Riley for cycling was taken away, right, there was and I think well-meaning, imperative from the board to find a cycling solution for bikes. And long-term, we can see what the future holds. Short-term, right, it's been years and that hasn't come to fruition, so it seems like it's fair at minimum for the short-term to regain access until maybe better opportunities arise. We had many years of, right, as far as I know, conflict-free sharing of the park, and I think it can continue as many other
Yeah, just
parks exemplify.
Just like Lauren said, at this point, everyone have access, by foot walking. But do you know how many percentage of population in Newburgh just focuses on Newburgh? Let's say if there's a what if the BCRP open for bike, how many population, 10%, 20% will go bike there, and how damaged the park would be?
I believe so first part of the question, I think from the earlier Trail Advisory Committee that did a very good statistically significant survey, I believe it was 22% of respondents were looking for additional cycling opportunities, right? So I don't know if that's all necessarily at Riley. Right, like I said, the wear and tear, I think a little bit of wear and tear comes from any user group, but again, there's a strong culture of stewardship in that cycling community to make sure trails are maintained and improved. And generally, from what I've seen, the group does a really good job policing themselves and trying to be stewards of those places that they have access to.
I have a
And,
question
let me,
too.
I just want to jump in on behalf of staff. This is public comment period that you guys are making available. We do not need to debate, interview, or refute any points made in public comment. You're welcome to just simply take them. I would caution you against doing that unless you're going to welcome public comments on specific items of the agenda that are related to this. So I would just say, it's okay to ask questions. Just make sure that they're true, honest, fair questions from an understanding perspective.
I just have a question.
And a note from
Oh.
Richard, he said, make sure you're close to the mic when you
Oh.
talk. I'm not one of those right now, so just,
So my question, Brian, is has the CPRD staff presented or shared with you other properties within the district that might be options for bike-only riding areas?
Like some options have been,
Have they taken you and shared with you options, and have you looked at other places in the district?
we've looked at
Basically.
other properties to understand if it might be something that's compatible with cycling. And again, I definitely appreciate those opportunities to look at some of those properties, but
Were any of them viable to create and make your own trails and have something that you could uniquely be just for bikes?
nothing equivalent to Riley. It's very, uniquely positioned, or well-suited, let's say, to cycling. And I think even if there was a new property that needed that infrastructure, it could be, years before you did have an option in the district again for cycling.
Thank you.
Brian, I had a question on your survey that was statistically significant. I didn't ever see that in any of our documents.
It was the previous trail committee, so I'd have to go see if it's available on the CPRD site, but it's been shared quite a bit.
Not this last community survey, but the
prior one, 22, 23? somewhere.
Yeah, I think,
Past Trail Committee?
yeah, right, same. I
Not
don't
the
know if
most
it was the
current.
same.
Not the
survey
most
that was
current.
done. Okay.
Yeah, probably about
Yeah.
2022
That's in there.
I've
timeframe.
been reading those.
It's pretty significant, very well done.
I just had a quick question, if you don't mind, that's just to get to know you a little bit better. You're a member of the cycling community, are you a member of the Newburgh cycling community?
Yep.
Okay, so this is kind of a request on behalf of the Newburgh or CPRD district people that's who you're kind of representing?
Yeah, there's a big community, obviously, in Newburgh, and I know it has been brought up before that there are people outside
No, I was just asking.
the
about
paying members of CPRD that use the park, and I think that's, management ought to acknowledge that, right? Just due to the positioning on the county of Washington and Clackamas County. I think it's, right, as a ratepayer, I would love to have it to myself, but, I don't think that's reasonable. I've used a park or two outside
Yeah,
CPRD
that wasn't
before.
where I was going, I was just trying to get to know you.
But, yeah, there's a large, I think very diffuse cycling community in Newburgh because everyone generally has to leave.
Sorry, one more quick question, Brian. So your suggestion was horses on west, bikes on east. But are you aware right now that there's been footing placed on the east for the benefit of the current park users?
Yeah, I still get up to the park pretty regularly and saw
Okay.
all the,
Okay, so that new all-weather footing that we're gonna talk about in this agenda item, and you can chime in there too, but how, I understand I'm not a cyclist, but how, I understand that footing would not be conducive to biking. So,
I don't know that it would be, I guess framing it as somebody that's done a lot of trail work on you know, I definitely appreciate today that I can keep my shoes a little cleaner
Yeah,
on the footing. It'll be, you know, again, it's, I guess with any surface, you've got different maintenance concerns and, right, I was always brought up to get organic matter off of trails. But again, I think you gotta pick what you wanna manage. So, but I don't see it as being an obstacle to being able to utilize that east side.
so the bikes could ride in the Hogs Fuel?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you and appreciate your guys' involvement.
Does anyone else want to comment while we're at this juncture? Oh, thank you. And just to set the context before you start, Alan, for those that aren't aware, so in the January meeting, Jim proposed that a vote be taken at the next meeting, February 26th, about bikes back on Riley. So that's the context that we're having. Oh, that's why we're having this discussion.
My name's Alan Holstein. I was on the previous CPRD Trails Committee, and it was actually my idea to separate the park into east and west, and it was adopted by the Trail Committee and recommended to the board, and from memory initially accepted until the new board was.
Alan, could you turn your mic on, please? Okay. I just got a text from Richard.
I didn't know I had one.
That's what it is.
Start completely over.
Oh, there you go.
Just keep going.
You may
So-
want to start over.
My
Alan,
name is
sorry.
Alan Holstein. I was on the original CPRD Trails Committee that reported to the board, much as yours does. It was our idea, and specifically my idea, to separate the park because of its remote nature. It's sort of difficult to enforce rules like the one that was ultimately adopted. Why not manage the conflicts rather than regulate them? And so I think it was accepted by the board at the time, but a new board came in that was seemingly in the pocket of local neighbors who initially voted to disallow bikes. And I'm with Brian. I think it's not a wise long-term strategy. In the meantime, I heard that there is a rule in the CPRD rule book bylaws that disallows the use of horses on CPRD trails. And I thought, that's a new one and should be addressed. I could be wrong. I haven't read it. I've just heard about it from one of you actually on the committee and someone else in the audience. So in closing, I support the mixed use, and never mind what Bob and Crystal O'Reilly wanted. CPRD bought it. There were no covenants, and it's up to CPRD to regulate it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so next on, oh, sorry, yes, certainly. I didn't know there were forms either, so thank you for jumping in.
So is it still on?
Yep.
It's orange. Jack Kriz, 9175 Northeast Newman Lane.
I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
Jack Kriz, Kriz.
I had this one.
Okay, I did have a couple things. I just want to support having bikes back up there at Riley Park. I never went up there as a cyclist, but I've been up there as a walker, primarily with my daughter and my dogs. But anyway, it seemed like a good place to ride. Certainly, it's not an unusual thing to have horses, bikes, and walkers in the same park. Metro does it at Chehalem Bridge. You use signage, you use other means to keep traffic separated when it needs to be, or let them mingle. So, what else can I say? To my knowledge, there's no other place on CPRD property to really ride safely, away from vehicles, away from traffic, away from golfers. Can't ride in the golf course, as I understand. So we need a place for young kids to learn to bike safely, without traffic, without a hard surface to fall down on. I taught my daughter at Rennie track when it was cinder track, and now I understand that is going away. So there's really no place to safely learn to ride a bike and fall off. So why not Riley Park? I've heard there's really no restriction that says you can't have bicycles at the park. Indeed, there were bicycles at the park in the past. Yamhill County, I live in the county, has no roads that I know of that have a shoulder. Sometimes there's a white line to help you see the edge of the pavement, but other than in cities, there's no good place to ride a bike. Safe place. I'm a road cyclist. I do it all the time. Some people call me crazy. I'm just a little more brave. But for young people, learning the rules, there's no off-road place to ride a bike. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
So I have concerns about a lot of this stuff. Are we gonna be discussing it, or how is this gonna come about?
We can open it for just, yeah, I just want to be careful to Clay's point a little bit, that we're not going to,
Right. And you do have an agenda item to
Yeah.
talk about the BCRP potential change in usage and discuss a recommendation to the board. So I would suggest, unless, you can talk about it right now if you reorder your agenda, just take that one first. Alternatively, you can just talk about the trail stuff and then get to it when you get to it.
okay,
But
let's,
I think you'll get there one way or another.
does everyone agree we can reorder while we're on the topic? And
Sure.
Yes, okay. So, do you mind if I just set the context a
Yeah,
little bit here? And I think, what I'd like this, and this is a suggestion, but what I would like this trail committee to do tonight is think about the trails, you know, obviously it's been years of debate about bikes on Riley, what's on Riley, et cetera. We're not gonna solve that tonight. It is, the reason it's on the agenda is that it's coming up for vote again. Jim has put it on the agenda for the board meeting in a couple weeks. And I put it on this agenda because I think we should talk about it as the trail committee, as if we're taking care of the trails, not because we think bikes should be there, or horses should be there, or hikers should be there all together, but I think, what does it mean for the trails? And what does it mean for CPRD operating and CPRD management? And I think that's how I want to talk about that and I'll present a little bit more about that, and then we can discuss. And everybody's willing, they're obviously open to bring up other things, but I just want to make sure that we're not necessarily debating horses versus bikes tonight, but so, and it's almost coming at it from the hiker perspective, because even though there's a lot of noise from bike groups and horse groups, it's really the hikers. The hikers are probably 80 to 90% of the park users today. And if we think about it from that perspective, I would argue that hikers, that the current user group has compatible trail impact and compatible trail requirements. So right now, the hikers and the equestrians are up there. Hikers and horses don't have the same footfall every time, right? They're not making one trail on the trail. It's general use of the accessible trail. Bikes at times can make a track, right? They're making a single track. And it can be disruptive to the trail surface, the soft surface. I understood, which is why I asked the question of Brian, that bicycles prefer the natural surface. You know, no hogs fuel that's up there now, no other trail material, organic or otherwise, on the trail. The hogs fuel that nonprofit put up there, donated $20,000 to CPRD to put up there, is really benefiting both users of the park, both user groups of the park today. It eliminates the mud, it makes the trails, more defined, where people can go and not go. It is all organic material. It levels the trail surface for older people and, strollers and runners, etc. And it's reasonably priced. And the maintenance on that is doing more every couple years, filling it in where it gets low. And I think what we've realized is that partly because of that, and partly just word of mouth, the hiking community has really exploded up there. They're able to hike after these big rains and stay dry and use all the trails because there's no rivers going through some of the trails that we've experienced before. And the horses are being able to use the trails in the winter now, where in the past it was shut down. It really was only open to horses typically from, May to, let's say, late September or sometimes October if we have a dry month or two. So all in all, I think everybody's using the park more. The current user group is using the park more. I think if bikes are allowed either on multi-use trails, and again, I'm just looking at it from the hiking perspective and the current state of the park and the current user group of the park, I think that's going to have impact on the trail surface. I'm curious as to how the bikes could ride on the hogs fuel. So then maybe there are single tracks on the side or whatever, but it's going to have an impact. And even if there's separate trails for bikes versus walkers, it's going to have an impact. And it's going to be up to CPRD to utilize resources, both manpower and also financial resources, to make sure that those trails are maintained. And almost recreate trails every year based on the damage that I understand has happened in the past. So, the hogs fuel that's been contributed by a private organization has been really beneficial to the current user group. There's still a big pile there left to be spread, and the initial stuff was spread both by a volunteer group and staff, a lot of hours from staff, and they were really happy, as I understand, with the volunteer group and the way the trails look now. There's still a big pile left to be used, and the nonprofit has also pledged to contribute more financial resources to the west side so that the hikers could enjoy the west side as well. I don't think anybody hikes on the west side right now. Or you do. Bob's crazy, but down in waterworks and stuff gets pretty muddy. And we could fix that with very reasonable financial investment, or zero from CPRD, and reasonable effort. The other thing is that I would dispute that there wasn't any conflict. There was conflict before when we tried multi-use trails, and I think it's primarily a safety concern. And I think, again, if this happens, it's more financial resources on behalf of CPRD to monitor. There's no gate on the east side, so access, is any time. So I guess in conclusion, then I'll open it up to discussion and thoughts on this. We can decide what we want to do here, but if we, after discussion, want to vote on a recommendation to present to the board, we can do that or not. And I would ask us to consider that if we vote, we could vote that we're going to ask the board to put more thought and time into this decision versus making the decision in 2 weeks, because I don't think we're prepared for these reasons and many more, but I don't think we're prepared to make this user group change.
Can I just make a point?
Yeah.
So there was a master plan process that had gone through, and there was an issue of concern about safety, having bikes and horses share the same trail. And then a great decision was made, well, you've got enough property, you could divide the park in half and have these two user groups separate. So, you know, as a park and recreation professional, I looked at that and said, well, that makes perfect sense. And then suddenly, the board says, no, that's not a good idea. So I think there was already a lot of thought and analysis put into it. I'm not sure what else they need to think about now. They can go back to the master plan, look at all the work that was done with that, and decide whether they wanted to agree with it or not.
So I think that decision primarily came down to honoring the donor's intent, Dennis, and, well, two things.
But
Honoring the donor's
we already
intent,
know
let me
there was
finish,
no-
please.
There was no covenants that came with the property.
You're correct, there are no covenants.
So-
There are no legal covenants.
The property was in jeopardy. The Park and Recreation stepped forward and was able to put it into public use.
Correct.
So it's up to the board to decide what kind of public use they want to do with the property.
Yes.
Not up to the original foundation.
Correct, but I think a big argument is that CPRD should honor that or consider that as part of this decision because it was a donation, you know, they paid some debts of the current owners or the former owners because the park didn't want to inherit property with a lien on it, understandably. The park paid off those liens, it was $200,000, and they were gifted, you know, $6 million plus of land. So I think the donor's intent should be considered, and that's really what it came down to when the vote was made. And the other point that I want to make is that the separation did not work. There were bikes on the west side all the time.
Well, that's a management issue.
Right, and so I think that's a consideration. Are we gonna have a
There was no-
ranger or
there-
two?
The park,
at the
when
park.
we went up and looked, there was no signage, it's just becoming a park, it's just developing. Those management issues had not been addressed yet.
There were
with the-
signs.
With the new master plan.
Well, the new
that
master
made the
plan says no
decision that
bikes.
they
The
would
current master
separate
plan says no
them.
bikes.
Then you needed signage, you needed some staff up there to understand what that means.
I agree, and there was signage
And-
before, no bikes, no horses, and that's part of what I'm saying now, is if this decision is made in 2 weeks, we're not ready.
Who's not ready?
The park isn't ready.
Well, the park can still make a decision and then decide what management needs have to occur in order to make this a reality.
Well, I think there's safety concerns.
Yeah, so, John, and then Bob.
And the previous, the Heritage Trail Master Plan you referred to also talked quite a bit about shared paths and widths that they should be. They should be 12 feet wide. And I don't remember any trails up there being 12 feet wide. And that's like Chehalem. They do have bikes and horses on Chehalem, the metro property, but it's at least 20 feet wide because it's an old.
Yeah, but the master plan did not have shared trails. It's pedestrian and horses or pedestrians and bicycles. One
Yeah,
or
for
the other.
shared.
There were not bicycles and horses shared. The park was separated from the east to the
No,
west.
the master plans that I saw that were referred to here had diagrams of what a path cross-section would look like
For shared users
for shared
regardless.
users,
Yeah,
including
sorry.
bikes. But, so I'm new to this, so, you know, I don't know the history, but it just seems like the safety is also a big issue with bikes and the relative speed and sort of quietness of a bike just appearing there. I know for horse riders, that's a big problem.
And that's why they separated them.
Yeah, okay, so they
Yeah, the
separated.
topography is not.
East side versus the west side.
But is there a concern for hiking? It's the same with bikes and hikers too. If you've got a quiet
Happens all the
bike,
time.
somebody gets run over. It's so.
Parks all the time.
Okay.
But there's also a
Bikes
lot of
and
parks, Dennis, that
walkers.
have separated and have dedicated mountain bike parks, even when there was
Some
only
for-
pedestrian,
for-
right? Because there's been issues, and I think at Crystal Riley specifically, the topography is such that there's lots of blind corners and lots of slope, and the bikes go fast. And, I mean, it's not all bikes go fast, but many of the bikes go fast. And I think pedestrians, you know, specifically older pedestrians with dogs or whatever, are at extreme risk.
They're at risk with horses as well. I mean, come on.
Horses and pedestrians are generally traveling almost the same speed.
Make a
Bob?
comment?
Yep. Were you done, John? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Bob?
I'm part of the 2-foot users of the park, and I've been on that property now, using it for 26 years. We were at first invited by Bob Riley to come and my wife could ride her horse there, I could hike there, and just very generous about doing that. They just said, stay off the fields, shut the gate, if the gate's shut it, if the gate's open, leave it open. And very gracious to do that. So I've been there before, long before the bikes. I was there during the period of the bikes. And I've been there literally every day since there weren't bikes in the park. So I can just share my experiences. Number one, as I think Lauren mentioned, by far and away the biggest user group in Bob and Crystal Island, probably you and Young, are people that are walking or hiking. And probably 80 or 90%. If you go up there on a nice weekend, even this time of year, parking lot will be almost full. I mean, it's a very well-used park. I'm up there literally every day, and I see people out there that are as foolish as me, hiking in the rain and all that stuff, just because we enjoy someplace we can go and have a peaceful environment to be out at. That's, to me, that's extremely important. Safety is absolutely the number one priority. I've had experiences not only in Bob and Crystal Riley, but as a volunteer in a very large California state park 30 years ago, and believe it or not, it was a problem then. And that was a park that had rangers out patrolling, and it was a constant problem. There was a lot of negative interaction between bikes and hikers, and I saw that when the bikes were here. And I know that somebody came and gave a presentation to the committee a few months ago and was explaining that there's different types of mountain bikers and, you know, whatever it was, and then there's the extreme mountain bikers. And I said, well, don't they use, oh no, they won't use the park. I said, who's gonna stop them? There is nobody monitoring or policing who comes into the park. I get the excitement of going fast. I understand it. I used to be like Jack, a fanatical road biker. I really understand the thing about speed, but I also understand the hazards and the problems. And I can only tell you from my experience, well, I've encountered some very nice bikes and families. I've encountered some incredibly dangerous and rude. I've been yelled at to get the F off the trail. I've literally had to jump off the trail. At my age, I don't jump very fast. And it really, I stopped walking on the east side of the park because there was always this thought in my mind is, what's coming down behind me at 20 or 30 miles an hour? What's coming around a blind corner in front of me? Whatever it is. And some people really, I mean, unfortunately, just like you see people driving on the roads, ignoring the traffic, the speed, and driving like, you know, fairly reckless. That happened there too. I was extremely pleased when I didn't have to deal with that anymore. What I'm concerned about is, I talk to the hiker group on a daily basis. I'm not trying to bias them one way or another, but the comments I got after the bikes was almost universal. We're really glad we don't have to deal with this anymore. And this is your number one hiker group. What did not happen, what CPRD did not do, is nobody was up there talking to that user group. What do you guys think about having bikes? Nobody. You did a survey, and I queried for 2 weeks, I queried every hiker I ran into, did you know there was a survey? Zero knew. So people that may not live in the district had no idea that there was a place to give input. There are some other flaws with the survey as well that bothered me, but I really think you need, or the board needs to get a good survey done by CPRD staff, no agenda from any, just get an honest, unbiased survey. What do you think about this? So the hundreds of people that come up there each week, even at this time of year, what do you guys, what's your feeling about having mountain bikes on the trail? I think that is prudent to do before you make a decision, not afterwards where people are screaming and yelling. And the only question I have for Jim, maybe for Brandon also, is I understand when I was walking recently at U of Young, bikes are now prohibited there. And I was told, maybe I'm wrong, there have been problems. So the bikes were then prohibited. So if that's the case, and you know there's problems at a small park, why are we considering doing it up there where the danger level is so much greater? So I just think we're jumping way ahead to get the information that needs to make a prudent decision.
I'd like to respond to a couple of those comments if I might. So one, bikes are not prohibited from U and Young Park. However, there is ambiguity amongst how staff have interpreted what is appropriate and safe behavior. And so occasionally, people have been asked to stop biking because there are lots of other user groups. There are at least 5 different user groups U and Young Park, whereas at Bob and Crystal Riley Park, I would say that there are predominantly 2 user groups, although those could be split into all sorts of different userships depending on how much splitting you want to do.
Who are
So,
the other user groups
just
that,
hang on.
oh, sorry.
So they are not officially prohibited, but we still have problems because there can be user conflict when it's not designed correctly. And I would say one of the biggest management problems that I see from the open houses that we've done recently, from the comments that we saw in the public outreach, from the trail surveys that were done differently, is that there's very little proactive management done with respect to the user groups. And so would I say it's ever going to be perfect? Seems unlikely. There will probably still be conflict despite good design efforts, and we haven't taken those good design efforts. Bikes are rarely a problem going uphill. They're almost always a problem on the flats and downhill. That's a design opportunity for reducing conflict. The separation as opposed to multi-user thing, that's another design opportunity that was proposed by the prior group. Those are all approaches that can be done. We were going through the master planning process, observing different opportunities and alternatives for managing those things. Staff were looking for a certainty before deploying resources, whether that be enforcement resources, trail and education, or whatever, before they did that. But during the master planning process, a decision was made to change the usership. And so to some extent, that really limited what those conversations had been prior to that, really changed what direction that went. So I appreciate some of those statements, and I think there's merit in some of them, but I do not completely agree with all of them.
But Clay, would you say that there hasn't needed to be attention to it because there is no conflict now? Right? There is no conflict that I'm aware of between the user groups at Bob and
I've had
Crystal
a
Riley
horse
now.
rider tell me to get out of the way when I'm hiking. They think I should get off the trail, they think I should do this or that. We always have opportunities for etiquette. One of the things we saw for better etiquette. So when there's a, no conflict, as a hiker weighing in less than 200 pounds, and then a rider plus an animal that has a level of uncertainty about what I'm gonna do and that is skittish, there's always a possible hazard there. One of the most popular things we saw from the voting exercises in the kind of bike breakout room of the open house were the trail etiquette signs. And there were equestrian enthusiasts there were bike enthusiasts, and then there were probably people that are just middle of the road. And so the trail etiquette sign, based on the history that we've had at Bob and Crystal Riley Park in particular, but probably a good lesson for places like U and Young, where there's lots of things, it's an education opportunity on how do we create a good culture. I'll tell you that having come up here from Southern California, where there's a lot of different types of surfers, and they regularly don't get along, they've made a lot of opportunities to have them share the water in ways that are more productive because they have full-on fights break out all the time. And you would think that that should be a pretty chill opportunity, and it's not. So I think that we can make those things better. And I've heard these sorts of things in places that are not local parks but are national forests, which with much bigger mileages, where for years I have heard bicyclists say that equestrians are tearing up the trails, and equestrians saying that and vice versa, and then hikers pointing at both groups and saying that they're making their lives hard. So everyone points the fingers at each other. Realistically, these are big enough spaces, we should be able to proactively manage them. But a lot of that depends on the board direction that we have. Staff knows the board direction we have at this time. It's a little scary for us, and one of the worst things that can happen is getting ping-ponged back and forth on the usership of parks every
Yes.
2 years or so.
Yes.
So that's a real challenge, and staff will be sharing that with the board, although I think they're pretty aware of it already. They know that we think that's the worst possible outcome. And so I would really encourage, if there are brilliant ideas out there between something, if the board's gonna talk about things, give them some alternatives that they might not already be aware of. I don't think, there's a lot of space between do nothing and make a complete change, or reverse course. So there's a lot of alternatives that might somewhere be there. I don't know exactly where the board discussion is gonna be. It's 5 different people that all have their own minds. Staff is not gonna be making a specific recommendation about what they should do with the park. We've already been told by the board that they will be making a decision on this because they already did. That tells me they did it once and they can do it again. But I think public input and recommendations to help them make a good decision that's what I would encourage.
So 2 comments on that. I mean, they said they're gonna make a decision, but are you saying that it is in that realm of do nothing and do this? That's my first question. The
Well-
second, can I make another comment?
Sure.
And then, I would love it if trail etiquette signs worked, and maybe it takes something different than's been done before.
Mhm.
But I was walking, as the trail committee, I think a lot of us were walking with Brian and a bunch of people that had CPRD jackets on with big logos, and there were people not behaving properly, and dogs running up and fighting with other dogs. It wasn't bikes and horses, it was dogs and hikers and stuff. And Brian said, this is an on-leash park, and they told him off. I mean, I think etiquette would be awesome if we all ingested it and and used it on a regular basis, but I think that's not a reasonable thing to wish for. So I think it's gonna take more.
I suspect you're right.
Well, also on that walk, at Ewing Young, there's only one trailhead where it says dogs on leash only, and the other 2 trailheads don't have any sign. And the people that we saw on that walk was coming from one of the trailheads that doesn't have any sign about, hey, you have to have your dog on a leash.
I know, but, I mean, we
But
see it
in
every,
And frankly, they
on
can
dog
still
leash
blow you
law.
off, but
Right.
they made a decision to go past that sign, and it is against the law. And they can be held to that. Without that sign, they can't really be held to it.
right, but CPRD is not going to have the resources to hold people to that.
They can have the resources to make sure all the trailheads are signed if there's no dogs that are allowed to be off leash.
Yeah, but we could
And
have
then
put up
Ewing Young is a
57
perfect
signs, and
spot
if they're
because
not powerful, they're not
You
working.
have an option to give them. You can say, hey, there is an off-leash area in the park. So it's a great option, or you can hike on the trail with your dog on a leash.
I had one
Okay,
question,
yeah.
Clay, kind of on what you were talking about is, with the new bikes coming, e-bikes, and I have a daughter that rides an e-bike that's a mountain bike could go 40 miles an hour. So how do we, or will the trails be open to those type, if the decision was made to put bikes back on, how do you police that type of bike? Do you allow, I mean, that's almost like a motorcycle, really. And we don't allow other motorized vehicles in the park, so how do we kind of police that? That's one of my questions.
Sure.
Wow.
Because
So,
that's,
I'll
yeah,
say, based on what we have now, we don't have a plan for that.
okay.
We've never policed it before, as you well know. I would say the state park system has struggled with that sort of management because it's
Yeah.
changing so rapidly.
Mhm.
We can put up some things, we wanna make sure we don't have too heavy a hand, because people that have assistive devices, we don't wanna stop them from using our trails.
Right.
Because that's not really the target. But people that are using throttle-controlled e-bikes, which really is a lot like a motorcycle with a small CC, then those might be ones we don't really want. Whereas ones that have a pedal assist, where it gives people an opportunity that might not otherwise be able to ride comfortably or regularly or whatever, and they're not going excessively fast, maybe those are okay. So again, we might have to take a more proactive stance on how we're managing our trailheads and doing things. We have started collecting a few samples about those. Again, giving some things like regular trailhead spaces where we can have information stations, that is a starting point, that is not an end point, to Lauren's point. Probably having something like a ranger that's out there, if we need to enter an IGA with the sheriff's department and see if we can get additional resource assistance or something like that, that's the sort of thing we do, if we have to. We don't want to do extra enforcement, we don't want to have that heavy hand. My experience around national parks is there are certain national parks, they will ticket you for everything possible. If you look like you're thinking about spitting out your gum on the trail, you get a ticket at Yellowstone, or at Yosemite. Sorry, I don't know
Well,
about
and I bring
Yellowstone.
that up too, another point to make is, so I was involved in the 4-H and we would do a ride with the girls at Step Stewart.
Mhm.
But it became where Step Stewart still has that option, you can still ride your horse up there, but we quit going because it was too dangerous for the girls because of the bikes. And so when we talk about mixed-use parks, there are options there, but people don't go anymore. Like, we stopped going because it was not a safe place for the girls to be. And so I'm afraid that if you do that at Riley, you're gonna take away that option for those young people to ride.
And we don't want to completely remove that usership. That's not a goal. I've never heard that discussed by anyone.
Yeah.
So,
But it'll be something that happens that you
Yeah.
don't intend, that's my point. It's
Right.
not an intention, but it will happen. And then you're pushing a user group out that likes to use the park.
well, like I said, staff does not want fast decisions. Fast decisions left a very frustrated user group already, and that's where we are. I know that some of the community members feel that having just hikers and equestrians out there is a restoration to how it used to be. But other people feel like we didn't see any rules there. CPRD did not inherit any rules by law, by deed, by anything like that. Therefore, we think they should be advocating in our interest too. There's different user groups, and CPRD is in a place where we have to navigate things for all the groups. But we also have board direction that they think as a network, this is the version that they've told us to work on. And we're gonna follow board direction that we get.
So on that note, Clay, is there anything that you could share that's been shared already about discussions? Because, don't get me wrong, I want everybody to, personally, like, people should have a place to do what they want to do, right? So is there anything that you could share about CPRD considering, I mean, it came up a little bit when Brian was speaking, but considering a mountain bike park only? And where do we think we're at at that? And is it something that the board would consider if it's out here? And I know Brian mentioned, years of development, but maybe it's not, and so how do you make a decision now that has impacts that we've been discussing and a fast decision, or do you invest and have a little bit longer term vision and make something that's really good for all the user groups?
So I think that staff and the board all want the CPRD system to serve as many people as possible in as rich a way as possible. I think there's a lot of gray area in what that looks like, and I doubt that we're gonna get everyone to agree with us no matter what we do. I don't know that I can share anything that's particularly insightful right now. One of the things that I do hope to bring to the board during their next meeting is a proposal from a consultant that we've been speaking with that's an approach we could take in analyzing our properties. Less from having stakeholders go look at it, but from someone who's got experience doing professional trail design and those sorts of things. Could that take a long time to stand something up, even if something's identified as being right that's already in our portfolio? It could be, and there's kind of a cost-benefit analysis that I would expect the board's gonna have to think through about that and say, gosh, that could be a long lead. Is it worth it? And I don't know how they're gonna land on that. And I don't even know exactly how we would analyze that and getting their feedback on what they need to help them make a good decision. And that is gonna be something that we want too. We can start getting them better information. I'll be honest, to the bike community, I would say that we probably should have done such a study already. We probably should have done it a year or two ago. I wasn't here for all of that. I've been here a year. Frankly, I probably should have made sure that happened earlier. But we're gonna go ahead and do it now. And we've started looking at some of our properties, including some of our bigger properties with our bike community stakeholders to ask, does this feel like this could be a new home? And none of them seemed like they were incredibly ripe for different reasons. We're gonna have this person look at those properties as well as some other properties that we don't own to see if we've got that. I will say that I'm gonna be a little cagey, about some of those and not talk about it too much, because not owning things and then telling people that you want to own it before you own
Understand,
it,
for sure.
that's weird.
Yeah,
A little bit.
Probably makes it
Understand.
more expensive if you decide to pull the trigger.
Right.
But, you know, we are obviously looking for a new home for the bike community. That's the direction we've got. That's the thing we probably should have put a better foot forward in the past, but we're gonna try and do better now. And, I would say that I do appreciate some of the patience that they have shown with me thus far, and I will say that, you know, some of the things that we've done, like the community input survey last fall, not perfect. It was trying to get a step in the right direction to get some input to work with for initiatives like this. The open house that we did last winter, or in November, was some of the similar things, and we're doing that on multiple fronts. I know that Bob and Crystal O'Reilly always feels like a big deal, but it's one of many big deals that we have going on in fronts, so
Yep.
staff are always stretched thin. When you see me and Brian and Casey, there's nobody else around to work on stuff, for the most part.
Yep.
Maybe we should have fixed that too, and made it so there were more people prioritizing these sorts of things, but we do live within financial constraints like all local governments do,
yep.
so that's hard too.
Clay, thank you, I appreciate sharing that information, that's very helpful. The one thing I did find be the last point for me is, I was curious just how other places, what kind of issues they had with e-bikes. So you go on and start doing research, and what became apparent is, it's a national problem.
Yeah,
It's not just Oregon. They're wrestling with it. There's some places are closing trails completely to that. I mean, as I think Dana said, you basically have an electric motorcycle. At Bob and Crystal Riley, or any park, if people know there's nobody out there minding the store, they're gonna do what they want. And that's the situation right now.
agreed.
And my concern, on a personal levels, it just terrifies me, the fact that I'm gonna be on a trail with a bike going 30 or 40 miles an hour, because I won't be on that trail.
You won't be able to get
And
off.
there's other parks that have the same problem. I don't go to those. I don't wanna put myself in a position of having an unpleasant experience if I have a choice.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you hearing me out. For everybody, thank you.
Yeah, and safety is something that we get the privilege of prioritizing first, right? So you can't get to a good experience if you didn't get safety to start,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
right? So we get it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This could be funny questions or, childish questions. We heard tonight, and I think it's too early for us, we don't have information for us to vote. But I heard tonight that there are needs for biker in town, Newburgh, to have a place to bike, listen from two of you. And we talk about cost to maintain, and you said, in the future, we might have a new mountain bike park. And the most crucial thing is safety. But we all want to have the users to be able to use it. Is it possible for us to set date and time for biker, like, hey, you can come only Monday and Friday, or Monday and Wednesday during period of time? And let the hiker know that, during this time when you enter, you're gonna be with the bikers. Set kind of curfew time for them to be, and that's it. Because I think no matter where you are, the cost of maintenance the surface gonna be wherever. Either, maybe it's cheaper to have one park and then put the money to maintain the park instead of, going find a new one and have to find new budget to create a new park. So I'm just saying, set that in time.
I think those things were discussed during the prior trail committee when they looked at some of the options. Does that sound correct, Brian? Or anyone that was on the prior trail committee, because we have a couple of people who are here, we've been taking.
No, we talked about having volunteers manage the usage.
Hmm.
You could have horse people manage the bike trailhead and say, you can use this and have whatever, but having volunteers to manage it and set precedent.
Do you mind if I sum up, because since you're not on a mic? Sorry, I opted
Yes,
into that.
please.
But you said that, no, we didn't look at it from a temporal perspective, but we did look at it from a more proactive management perspective of using volunteers to manage
Yeah.
the decisions.
Okay, so, maybe just one more bit of information. I have a question for Brian, and then we can wrap up and talk about whether we're gonna make a recommendation. But, and Brian, I don't know if you have to get to the mic, but would you be willing to talk about where you can ride now? In district or not in district for bikes?
Sure. So the question, where can you ride now? I think this is a little bit of a difficult question, and you can shoot me down here, but like make a little bit of an equestrian analogy. I'll try one. You can grade me. I think, and like Jack kind of hit on it, right? So like lots of different types of cycling, different folks are looking for different types of activities, I would assume. Right, I don't know a lot about the equestrian sports. I know in the Olympics there is eventing and I think dressage and some other things. And so like there's no one size fits all, but generally, right, like I guess maybe from a personal note, that's very easy and and reputable, right? Like Corvallis, Stubb Stewart, Silver Falls. Right, east is always just kind of a tough direction because you've got an interstate and a metropolitan area you've got to weave your way through, but out at Sandy Ridge,
Chehalem Ridge.
there's a glimmer of a hope that there'll be trails closer to McMinnville, but nothing that is kind of that, you know, and again, what I'm usually after is more of the kind of in nature, natural trail, you know, and even personally, like I don't like some of the more bike parky groomed trails, you know, kind of old civilian conservation corps, narrower trails, which I think too, as I get older, kind of maybe unintuitively make you feel like you're going faster while you're going a lot slower because they
pedaling.
are narrower and more technical. So if you fall, you don't hurt yourself. But yeah, I mean, there's really,
Chehalem Ridge,
it's kind of state parky, so for younger riders or for kids. But I would assume like the equestrian community is kind of the same, where like, I don't know if you can ride at Shampooey, but while I'm at Mission, like that's like, it's not terrible,
we can't
but
ride at
it's
Shampooey, but
it's
we can
not
at
what
Mission.
I can't imagine a lot of equestrians if you're used to riding in the national forests and the wilderness area that, like Willamette Mission's better than nothing. But that's a very different draw than Riley, where you actually have some topography and like a much more immersed, kind of less curated feeling in a sense. So, but yeah, like immediate metro area, there's very, or whatever.
Tryon
Portland
has
metro.
a place you can ride to, Tryon Park.
I think there's like a
I
perimeter
read
trail.
today that Walton Hills Park has places you can ride in their parks.
Yeah, there's a newer park in Oregon City. I don't know what the
Lake
mileage
Oswego has
is.
a training park for mountain bike riding too.
Yeah, a lot of those too are some of the metro stuff, like Gateway Green is out at the 205 I-84 interchange. But those two, it's like there's such little mileage that, it's very hard to justify. You're not going to make a special trip out there.
I would just say, just for the equestrians, I'll say, there's no place for us to ride within the district, the Chehalem Park and Rec District. And there are options for bikes to ride. It might be a different discipline of bike than you ride, but there's nowhere that we can ride. Even the new trails that you're building, the bypass trail, we will not be able to ride there.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That's helpful, because we hear a lot of that too, and, yeah. Okay, so I will just throw it out there. Does anyone feel like we as a committee can come up with some feedback or recommendation to that? I mean, we're always on the board agenda to report out as a committee. If we feel that we want to communicate something regarding this topic, we'll have to ask to get higher on the agenda before this vote. So,
Lauren, can I
Yeah.
jump in?
Yeah,
If you guys
please.
have something from the committee specific to the agenda and you kind of do something by a motion as far as a recommendation, then staff will just add it to that agenda item. So we would just present it to there as part of the agenda item, unless there's a different alternative you
Oh,
want.
okay.
Because it would be directly related to the agenda item. It would be just like if there was a public comment that seemed like it was directly about that, then, I would probably, when we send a board letter to them on the, whatever we're presenting, then that would just be an attachment. We just make sure that the board letter, which is really just a cover letter that may have some extra discussion, that it references like, hey, you got a recommendation from this CAC or this whoever.
Not to be discussed, but in the pre-read material, you're saying?
Well,
Or-
it could be part of, it's directly related to your agenda item that you've requested. So if you're doing
see.
something and it's directly related, I don't think that staff's got a problem with it.
Okay,
If it's not directly related, then we'd be like, well, let's do it in their update.
okay,
Or as a
okay,
sub-bullet on your update. There's always ways of cutting and slicing the agenda. What we wanna make it is so they get to have the conversation they're intending, and they have all the relevant information they need to.
okay.
So don't worry too much about how it ends up on the agenda. We'll
structure.
Make sure it ends up somewhere there, they can find it and they don't miss it, because that doesn't look good on staff either.
Okay,
If we played hide the ball with the agenda, so.
great. Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts as to, I will propose something, or if anyone has any thoughts as to how we could manage this or articulate the
So,
discussion here
Tell me in
tonight?
the next 2 weeks, the board will make decisions.
Yes, so it's on the agenda on February 26th, which is 2 weeks from Thursday, right? To vote on bicycle access to Riley.
For me, just my personal thing, I think this is just like a throwing up for us, after we don't have a meeting in January. I think we don't get enough information, hearing from Jack, hearing from Brian, we don't hear from another group either, from the horse people. I think the board should have more public comments to hear more, because I heard from one of you talking, there was not on the survey, the recent survey about biking trails or anything. That's just me. I think we need to hear more from the local residents about what they want. That's just me.
Great.
That's just me. We cannot just come and propose that, let's go vote. I think we need to hear more people, maybe younger children who say, I don't have a place to bike, or some other people who said, I don't want to have a bike up because they hurt me or something like that. I want to hear more about that.
So, I just wanna throw in that I think we all agree we need more trails, and it would be nice to have this whole selection of trails. And it sounds like that the staff is considering some options that we are still incubating now. Like
We're not actively working on any
we have
items.
don't you have a
We're-
consultant looking at some of these other options?
They're gonna be doing a proposal, they've got a proposal that they'll be looking about things that could be right, but we're not making alternatives related to Bob and Crystal Riley Park.
Right. So the point I want to make is that Bob and Crystal Riley is really an outstanding resource for hikers and horse riding that could be severely diminished by having bikes there. According to some stuff we've heard, other people say that they can
I'm
cooperate.
not willing to support that.
Okay, all right, but I'm saying, some people say, even here, we've got a disagreement here and we just don't
Right.
quite have enough information
Well,
on
more
it.
than half our board are equestrian users. Half our committee.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure fairly we could take a vote and.
no, I'm not
make
saying
a
we need a
recommendation.
vote on that, I'm just saying that to take what is a good resource for equestrian and hiking and diminish it on this short term, like in 2 weeks, making a decision, sort of being forced into that. And
But you use the word diminish, why do you, I don't necessarily support that would
Okay.
diminish the park use. I think it would.
Okay, well, I
think it
do.
would
I
increase
do.
the use
I
of
think
the park.
I think we've heard from Bob and others that having bikes up in that area, attracting them to that area, brings in other concerns that we haven't quite dealt with.
And there's only 3 people that I'm aware of that have that ride here, Dennis, that's not more than half, that's 3 of 7.
In any case, my point there
That's
was,
not true.
yeah, Bob and Crystal
Yes, it
Riley
is.
has a great resource, and there's some other things that are,
But it
Sort of
could be a
long-term.
great resource for biking as well.
okay. So that's a good point. So we need a way to like,
Well, that's
Work
why,
through
that's
that
why you
instead
go
of
through
just
a
throwing-
master planning process, and the board did.
Yeah,
You know,
this is
I've-
the 4th or 5th master plan
I've
that's
read these
currently
master
approved.
plans and they just really don't get at the heart of it. That was one of my points that I put on the agenda, is there's these Heritage Trail master plans, and we've got a lot of information, and
Well, and then,
Comes down to
from a master
something.
plan, then you have a management plan of how do you manage this use now.
right, so I was,
But does the current master plan does not include bikes? So it would be a change of the current master plan is what you're saying, Dennis?
Well, the current, I don't know what the current
The
master.
The current master
is.
plan
If I
says
look
no
at
bikes.
If I look at the most recent master plan, it still had the bikes and horses separated.
No,
with
no,
a
it
little
doesn't, it's
disclaimer.
page 17, says no bikes. Page 17 of the current master plan, and it is the 4th or 5th iteration of a master plan for
Well,
Bob and
but
Crystal Riley
Okay, I read
that have
through
not.
all the notes of all the meetings, and suddenly there's this decision that wasn't supported from anything I saw before that. So to me, it was very confusing, because I was following and I said, well, this makes sense. You know, it's a big enough park that you could actually really separate those uses to avoid that conflict.
So I think part
And
of the,
then suddenly, boom, there's
This-
this note saying no.
I
So I
totally
think-
agree, I read through all, since
So
I
I
was doing the
think-
committee, I read through
yeah,
everything.
let me
just
shed some
lost.
light as to why it feels confusing, because it is confusing and why it feels fast. Is that I think this is a big part of why that decision felt fast, is because bikes being allowed at Riley was not properly processed in the first place.
I would say
Right.
it wasn't properly managed.
It wasn't properly managed, it wasn't properly authorized, it didn't give staff and anybody time to prepare, right, or to put in management plans, right? It was a text message, and they allowed a race, and then all of a sudden there was races every week, and it effectively closed the park to the rest of the users, okay? So that was fast, and then the decision to restore the park to what it was before that fast decision seemed fast, but it was actually undoing something that wasn't properly done in the first place. It wasn't a takeaway, it wasn't anything like that, it was setting back to,
I'm just saying, if you review the public documents, it didn't make sense. That's all.
and I'm trying to explain why that might be, is because,
From your viewpoint, yes.
well, that's fact, that's what happened. But,
We have
Yeah.
Mr. Clemens on record saying that he gave permission for a one-use
Okay.
bike race, and that's what opened the floodgates. And that's on record if you go back and look at the
Right,
meetings.
but that can be managed.
Yeah.
It's-
But it wasn't the proper way to give permission, I think is what Lauren was saying. It was one superintendent giving a permission for somebody that had his private phone.
and, yeah, and that's why it
So
was
I think
confusing
that's why.
to everybody involved, and felt fast that
Yeah.
the board voted. And again, to Clay's point, the flip-flop of the board votes is concerning for lots of reasons. So I think that's something to think about too. But, okay, so,
Well, I'm just gonna say, I don't think we're at a point where we can make a recommendation to the board at this point to add with their decision.
okay, so in light of not being able to recommendation, can we have somebody, or I can report out on the discussion and concerns that
And maybe a
have been
recommend-
had here?
And maybe a recommendation to the board is there is lots of confusion and discussion amongst us and the public.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's a pause to allow, as Ohm said, to give the public more testimony, more research for the board and staff, and to really have a better understanding. Allow the consultant to do the
Assessment.
bike assessment that was promised in the December board meeting. And so maybe that's the recommendation, that the board pauses to allow for additional information and discussion.
One thing I would say, it's not a recommendation. I'm just saying, you know, we hear in the past for having bike, not having bike. Why don't we just set a trial period? I think within 3 months in summertime, we should see how bad the biker damage the trail. And we can evaluate how much the staff and cost to fix that. That just kind of thinking out loud, thinking outside the box.
I would not agree with it, because I think once you open the door to something, it's very hard to shut that door.
It's a cost.
I'm proposing that CPRD staff actually query the largest user group. That is prudent to make any decision, and you've not done that. There's been,
Respectfully, the trail study was done statistically valid in 2022. A non-statistically valid survey was conducted last fall, and an open house, which those are not statistically valid, but they're still forms of outreach, still forms of communicating with the public, which is common to do in financially constrained areas. Those are normal procedures, and one was statistically valid and talked about levels of interest in user groups. It might not have asked the exact questions we're looking for in this exact scenario, but that is a rare thing in any local government setting.
but I think it would be appropriate to have somebody from CPRD staff at the park, talk to the people, get their feedback, report that back out, and make a decision with at least having that information from the largest user group of the park.
But
Because-
Bob, then you're not, excuse me, then you're not reaching the people that aren't using the park. And maybe there's a reason why.
Well, I'm not sure how else you would reach them, but having
That's why a
somebody
statistically
at the-
valid survey
park.
that was done in 2021.
22, I think.
But
I'm just
the
pointing out
hikers
that
wouldn't be not
we do have
using it,
some
yeah.
resources that the board can use. Maybe not exactly what you're looking for, so if you wanna propose that we do something specific like that, that's okay. I just want to acknowledge that there are some other resources that were conducted that are relevant.
I would like to get it directly from, I mean, that's the 90% user group. And one of the consequences of, if you open up the park, half of it, is that user group is not gonna use that park. Not all of them, but they will leave, because they don't wanna be in that environment. And so basically, that, in order to make one group happy, you're punishing another group. That's my feeling.
Some would call that a compromise.
Well, not if you drive
I
by.
think the fear in the most
I mean-
extreme case is that it's
But-
become a bicycle adventure park and no other users will use
And
it.
I would say that one of the things that we saw in the outreach that was conducted last fall was that there's a lot of frustration in the bicycling community, unsurprising, but that the equestrians were celebrating the status of what the park is now, and largely they were saying that they felt safer. When they mentioned something in addition to simply appreciating the park, they meant increased safety, which meant they've noticed that there was a change since then. So and I think that is an important observation that came from some of the outreach that was conducted, and it gets to your point about those users that are there and what they've observed since the bikes have left.
Yeah, and I think celebrating, I think it was thankful. I think it was grateful that the park was restored to the current user versus celebrating. I think it was grateful. So, okay, so what if in our report out, we say, we did not reach a conclusion on a fixed recommendation, a lot of discussion, a lot of concern. There was voices that discussed we need more input, we need more public comment. And
I wrote kind of pause on decision and then talk to active user groups.
yeah,
That's what I wrote down.
and kind of more more preparedness from a safety perspective versus a very quick decision. Does anyone have anything to add?
Well, I think some of the some of the options that might be considered. We
Yeah,
really don't,
and thorough discussion of options.
and
Okay. I would like to nominate John to do the report out, unless anybody else would like to.
Have at it.
Sorry, you were sitting right here.
okay.
We were there with you,
I'll do
John.
it.
Yeah.
I think I have
We
it.
will be there with you
All
to
right,
support
good.
you.
We will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I realize that we're way over time. I'm going to ask, but I think it was important. John, do you mind if we move your Chehalem Trails to the next meeting? Your agenda
No,
item?
not
Or do
at
you want
all.
to give a quick
It's just that
summary?
when I go to the Chehalem Trails Heritage, or Heritage, whatever, that webpage, I get right up really, sort of in my face are the previous strategic plans, and they have maps in them and stuff, a lot of useful information. And I would sort of like to have that be moved to maybe a resource page or something, because when we're trying to have, here's a map of what the trails are and the bypass information and whatever, and then all of a sudden there's something that
It's
has,
confusing.
has a bunch of other really nice maps in there. I'm drawn to maps, and so that they could just be demoted a little bit, and then, but also, as part of that, we should discuss what's in there.
Yeah.
You know, try to
Okay.
review, like, we've had this good discussion today about, like, what's the master plan and what's the management plan, and what was the strategic plan and the master, it just, I've been struggling with that, so that's all.
So you wanna, we'll move that one to next month?
Yeah, and maybe
Okay.
in the meantime, people can look on the
Okay.
website and get a sense of what John's
Yeah,
Yeah.
concerned
Okay.
about, and like some pre-work, so we can be prepared to bring some ideas. Okay, and then Brian's, wasn't able to make it, Brian Stewart, and we have this awesome map, and again, it's the result of a lot of hours from this committee, and it's great.
Beautiful.
And we've had great feedback from users at the park, that they finally aren't worried about getting turned around or, lost. So Brian said they're working with a company called TerraBuilt, who specializes in the kiosks, and they're gonna place the order for 2 classic trailhead kiosks. And Clay said this is life size of a trailhead.
That's my understanding,
Okay.
based on a short conversation with Brian.
Great.
But I believe that was what he said, that it would be something to be placed in a kiosk, a trailhead kiosk.
So one in the west parking lot and one in the east parking lot theoretically?
Something along those lines.
Okay, and then they're working with a company called Rock Art for all the stickers. We've had the Carsonite posts in there for a long time now. So they're working on the color-coded numbered trail stickers that, as we've all talked about, will have the trail numbers, etc. Another thing to consider, if things change, this will all have to be changed.
Beautiful. Lauren, remind me, the color is just typical color, right? It doesn't mean the difficulty of the trails.
We've indicated the difficulty,
Down
On the
I see-
right,
I see it now,
yeah.
I see it now, I see it.
yeah, so, yeah, it does,
Ah, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So when we as a committee were walking around, we were kind of talking about the
Awesome
rating and then,
map.
yeah, it's great. And originally we had like the satellite picture as the background, which I think is fairly typical for CPRD maps, but it was just too much with the colors that we wanted to use for the trails and everything. So Brian's team came up with this, and I think it's really clear and
Good.
great. Okay, so that was Brian's update on the kiosks and trail markers. We talked about that. We're gonna move that to next meeting, and I think we'll talk about the advisory committee go forward, check-in in the next meeting as well, if everyone
What about
agrees.
the current trail projects?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was Brandon, yeah, so I drove by, or Clay, whomever, if you can delegate to Clay, but we drove by Sanders Park yesterday, and there's lots of stuff going on.
They're busy. If there's a problem at Sanders State, it's they're moving along too fast.
Yeah.
So we're really pleased with with those folks over there. I don't have any trail-specific updates for there. Brandon, do you have anything?
They might want to hear about some of the bypass phasing. Do you
sure.
want, you might know it a little more
Yeah,
intimately
yeah.
than myself, but I know that phase one is chugging along, some permits have been cleared,
Yep.
and now it's into the phase 2A, is that what it's called? That
Uh,
they're starting to look on how.
I just wanted to see what stuff you already knew. The, yeah, so,
Do my best.
so Brandon is correct. So we believe we've cleared the last of the permitting hurdles that we had to. We've been in permitting for over a year with state agencies. So once you finish the local planning process, you typically do what's called a joint permitting process if you're anywhere near a water body. So we had the privilege of working with Department of State Lands, DEQ, and Army Corps of Engineers. It was a ton of fun. And we're finally on the other side of that, which we're happy about. A number of the construction materials have been purchased and placed in a laydown yard. We did that so that we could get away from some of the inflationary costs associated with construction materials because it's such a big project. And so those, once the weather is available, we'll mobilize. But it's winter. It's not usually when you
think.
do construction.
Yeah.
I mean, we have strangely mild weather, and so we're really waiting for that. And remember, bridges are near bodies of water. This is when the water's highest, so that's another part of what we're making sure that the timing is right for that. So there's trying to stay ready and make sure they can schedule it when they can. Casey is working on that and is working as proactively as possible with those folks. Greenworks is our project manager, and we're getting updates and trying to stay ready. But I don't have a date, and part of that is because it's so weather dependent. So, anything else you've heard that I didn't mention?
Ewing Young, you're gonna go talk to the commissioners potentially this Thursday?
That's right. So Ewing Young Park, the district, at the request of our board, has submitted a letter to the Yamhill County Commissioners. And so on Thursday, I will be standing by and basically reading snippets from the letter that was submitted to the county commissioners. And we're basically asking them to direct staff to do a publicly initiated zoning ordinance amendment. A very boring request for us asking them to change some things in their zoning ordinance that resulted in them denying our conditional use permit application. So in theory, if they can fix those things, then we can proceed and we'll resubmit for a site design review and a floodplain development permit. It would go swimmingly and it would be all fine. The, one of the couple of things to parse out there is it's related to transportation facilities interpretations that were made specifically with the word transportation facility and what is and is not a transportation facility. County staff had worked on something to address this, which came out of a LUPA, or Land Use Board of Appeals decision from 2018 related to the M-House West Sider Trail. So we specifically waited until some of the dust had settled a little bit on the transportation system plan change that recently happened. So we have no opinion about that right now. We just wanted to not be in the middle of it. So we thought timing wise, it would be better to go now rather than 2 weeks ago. And so that's what we're doing. And we think they'll be open to it. Staff for the county had previously, planning staff, had previously proposed changes that would have addressed that interpretation issue. And we reviewed it with a contract planner from the COG to make sure we weren't missing stuff. And we think that they generally proposed something that would work. So we're saying, hey, your staff already did this work. We would like you to complete the zoning ordinance text amendment in 120 days, which would be 4 months. So that gives them, I think, plenty of time, but not too much time, hopefully. So hopefully my board members won't give me funny looks and too bad, but it's just a hurdle. We want them to know it's in good faith, but also that we do want it to be done and not just say, yeah, we'll get to it. That it'll happen, especially since they've already done most of the work. But there are, when you do first reading, second reading, you gotta go to a planning commission, then you go to your county commissioners, those things, it does gobble up your months, but they have done most of that work. So we would like to do that. We don't think we're gonna get pushback from staff. We hope we don't get pushback from commissioners, but I'll be there in person to answer their questions.
Great.
That's hopefully this Thursday. Or it will be this Thursday.
Great.
I'll be there.
Nice.
One more thing I was hoping to bring up, not trail specific. I know you guys are volunteers and you work your tails off, and getting an agenda out super early is tough, especially when you're trying to figure out what to put on the agenda, especially when our agenda might affect that. I'm hoping that maybe, I don't think there's an official policy on when to get the agenda out by. But just notice, because it was received one business day before today's meeting, which didn't clear the 2 business days for ADA
No, hang on a sec.
languages. It was emailed, I believe, on a Saturday. That's when I received it personally. And
So maybe it wasn't posted, which is
Cat
somewhat
posted.
falls on staff, it's
Yeah,
not just
well,
the volunteers.
yeah, Kat posted it on the first business day that she got it, I believe. So, you know, it got out there in time. It followed all the laws, no worries about any of that stuff, but just, you know, I think
do we
we
have a
have to go
policy?
by.
Well, yeah,
Because if we
I
have a
would-
That's what I'd
policy,
wanna
I'd
look
like to
into.
Trying to do
follow
it a
it.
week.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy to give you what staff uses for our board meetings,
Okay.
and that's probably what the CAC should be meeting, if it's not in your guidelines. Which we typically publish the agenda no later than the Thursday, so 1 week prior to your meeting. So for the board, they meet on Thursdays, so no later than the Thursday preceding, so exactly 1 week.
Okay.
That gives everyone, especially if you have a packet, I don't know if you guys typically send out the packet materials. If it's just the agenda, it's kind of easier, it shouldn't make a big difference, and it's just getting in the habit of doing it,
Okay.
Okay.
so.
Yeah, and we were a little out of practice given this is our first meeting back since November, so.
And those
But
things
that's,
happen, and
yeah,
it did get
I
out there.
understand.
But, yeah, and if there's any questions about that, always talking to Kat's fine. We know that these are volunteers and folks are trying to do a good job, but to Brandon's point, from a public transparency and communication, always great. Plus, it makes sure that all of the CAC members know that we really do have a meeting coming up,
Yes,
so that
yes.
can be a plus too.
Yes, okay, so that, we will certainly target that, and that means that I'll be asking for attendance commitments at that time too.
That's a great thing to do, and I will add, if you don't have agenda items, you can always cancel a meeting. It is
Yeah.
not shameful, and staff appreciates it.
Yeah,
Particularly Brian, it's nice to him.
yes,
It's nice to Richard, who's watching us remotely. He covers all sorts of stuff. He's a one-man IT department.
yeah,
He does a lot for us. And when we notify of a cancellation, we typically put up a hard copy agenda in the door so that the public knows. And if we get enough notice, then Kat can go in and modify the calendar so it says notice of cancellation. So that if someone had like stuck it on their personal calendar, maybe they see it again. They see, oh, it's been canceled.
yeah,
So they don't come here accidentally.
I see,
So we
okay.
try and limit those confusions.
Okay, perfect, so we'll aim for that, I'll ask for attendance confirmation before it goes out the week prior. And also, equally importantly, agenda items, because, you know, I mean, I think I can generally assign what I think we should be talking about, but if there's things that I'm not aware of, please, 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 at any time during, from when we leave here to a week prior, send them my way so we can get them on the agenda.
You've done a great job.
Oh,
Lauren, if you guys are shooting for, let's say you guys tried to publish the Tuesday prior to your meeting, is there a date by which you would hope people on your fellow committee members would get you their agenda items, so you have time to
yeah, let's
punch it
just
in and
look
you
at
don't
that,
get crosswise?
let's just look at that right now.
And that can just be amongst yourselves, that doesn't have to be official, but it's just good working
Right,
communication.
right. I mean, it takes me 2 seconds to put it in the spreadsheet
Yeah,
and send it
But
over,
it's
but,
seeing it,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But let's see, our next meeting, does anyone have that handy? I can look it on, I'll send out an email,
Yeah, do that.
with some dates as far as when we should have suggested ideas in. And with confirmation of the next meeting.
And if it's truly easy for you, and if you
Math
tried to do it for like the Tuesday before, then you said everyone get you the things by Monday before,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe something like that.
Give some,
Keep it simple.
give some grace period there. Keep it simple, exactly. That is the name of the game. Okay, anything else? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
I'm a hiker too,
I am too.
just gonna say, not just really,
Yeah.
I hike.
I drove